to Retail Crime Uncovered, your go-to podcast for anything and everything retail crime related, sponsored by Secura Global. Here is your host, Professor Eveline Taylor.
Hi, Grant. How are things over in the US?
Not bad. It's been a great year so far, and as you can see, we're through an administration change, so fun times ahead.
I feel like I heard something. Has there been like an election or something over there?
It's pretty recent, and it was, honestly, if you think about the elections in the past, it was decided fairly quickly for the U.S. So within the first 24 hours, we knew, which I think actually helped in some of the public safety arena.
Yeah, so I was hearing that in some of the swing states that retailers were feeling quite nervous about the potential for civil unrest in the aftermath of the election results. Has anything transpired in those ways?
Truly, and that's where leading into it, that was expected, just kind of given the history with it all. But I mean, you're New York, Portland, Washington, Houston, some of your bigger cities, you expect some protest, civil unrest, especially with Oregon and Washington having some of the ballot boxes burned ahead of time. There was that expectation. But again, I think since it was announced pretty quickly, there wasn't as much buildup, turmoil, and all that unrest with it. It was a pretty quick turnaround.
What are you anticipating from this term in office? Do you think there is going to be a big impact on retail? Do you think we will see more civil unrest? Maybe not immediately, but in a few months, if not years. What's the sort of sentiment on the ground?
In the retail, it's a tough environment right now. I mean, we're coming also into the holidays, and we know holiday and shoplifting in the U.S. has been an uptick compared to crime in the U.S. as a whole in 2024 is on a downward trend from the past few years. But in the retail sector, shoplifting's up. Other crime types are up. So in the months and years ahead, there is a lot of movement going on behind the scenes, be it federal or state jurisdictions, to try to give more assistance to law enforcement and to develop these collaborations between private sector or your retail and law enforcement, because they know this is a growing issue and they need assistance across both sides of that.
Definitely. And there has been some sort of legislative movements and suggestions. What's the Grassley bill that I've been hearing about?
The Grassley bill, or CORCA, the Combating Organized Retail Crime Act, has bipartisan support. It's been growing in kind of, I think, how much it's been accepted, but really it's trying to develop create a multi-agency task force under Homeland Security investigations that's really trying to build that collaborative effort between local jurisdictions, the federal government, and just building that collaborative effort, be it prosecutorial or law enforcement. It's truly aimed at trying to reduce some of this retail crime issue and developing a set task force to do so.
And so this task force, that would be a national task force, would it, working across all of the states, or would this be state-based?
Ideally, since it's at the federal level, it would start from there, and then they would look for that support or collaboration within states. Of course, some of their states, you have a lot of local ORCAs or organized retail crime associations, but this goes beyond that. So they'll try to truly find local jurisdictions, prosecutors at the same time, to work with the feds, because I think they need more of that cross-jurisdictional level to be effective in this effort. It's going beyond state boundaries.
Wow. I mean, it sounds huge. Who's going to pick up the bill for this? Is there an expectation that retailers part fund this initiative?
To my knowledge, we haven't gotten into the financing side of it. With that, I think it's from the Fed side. The retailers are already losing millions at the end of the day. And it's trying to track this down, and it's from a multitude of different efforts. And organized retail crime ends up affecting all of us at large through just other inflation and everything with that. That's trying to go in to combat this and reduce this at large. If anything, I think it's more on the federal side to make an investment in this. Retail crime continues to grow in what we see in the news in terms of how it's affecting us. So I think there needs to be that concerted effort. With that, it's also building the collaboration between federal and local, which I think we all want to see. You see Department of Justice put a lot of money into that before in terms of other policing initiatives. I think that falls in that same valley within that same wheelhouse of you're trying to build collaborative to make crime reduce. I would put it on the feds more so than the retailers to do this.
And so where is the bill up to so far? You said it's got support from, across the political spectrum. When will we expect to actually see this be passed and enacted in legislation?
That's a great question. With that, there's no true timeline. We know how this goes, especially with an administration change, what comes up first, the voting procedures and everything with that. I wouldn't be shocked if it gets pulled up in 2025 and they try to push forward, because I think this is the right time of, at the end of the day, everyone's affected by retail crime and we're going to purchase anything, not only the businesses, but the consumers. And I think that's why it's starting to garner more and more bipartisan support, is everyone's affected by this. So I think it is going to be one of those items that does come up relatively quickly. It was introduced late 2023. It's kind of grown in support over 2024. So I think in 2025, if not early 26, there will be some effort in this. It might change similar to other bills and acts with that. But I think the overarching idea of it, something will come from it.
It's certainly one to look out for. I was lucky enough to recently be at a conference in Nashville, and I was talking to a senior asset protection manager there who was telling me about gift card fraud that was impacting the USA. So I've been doing a little bit of reading up on it, and I came across an initiative that has come out of the Homeland Security Investigations, the HSI, called Project Red Hook. Now, they lay the blame quite firmly on Chinese organised criminal gangs that are targeting the USA and committing all sorts of different variants of gift card fraud. Can you tell us a bit about this crime type? How is it happening?
Yeah, and you summed it up quite well there. It's an interesting take by HSI to focus on a Chinese organized retail crime group in the sense of that. But oftentimes they're partnering with runners in terms of who's on the ground in the US, be it Chinese nationalists or Chinese Americans, who are doing some of this on the ground work. And it could be gift card tampering. It could be setting up the victim assisted fraud, which oftentimes here we see it on the local news of the telemarketers, people on the phone calling you, trying to obtain information from you. Then they're using that to buy gift cards and purchase it and redemption codes and everything with that. Even email phishing hacks with that. But they're truly trying to get those redemption codes or the pins on the back of cards to where they tamper with them. They have all that card information. Then they go back, put the cards, be it back in the retailer's stock, and then they have all the information to use those, and they can sell it through the, be it darknet or anything with that. But they have access to it all. So it does create this conundrum for retailers to now work against.
Gosh, that's so interesting. So some criminals are going in, they're buying multiple gift cards, getting the information, somehow then covering up the fact that they've been able to access the PIN, and then taking the cards back and putting them back on the shelves. Is that?
Or it's running it through them. So yeah, so they're tampering with it to where they can scratch the PIN or putting a new PIN over it to where they still have access to the card number and the PIN itself. So when there's money added to it, they have that information. So then it can be used, and that's where they're linking it to a lot of, be it drug trafficking, human trafficking, even purchasing items in the U.S. and shipping them overseas to be resold. It's a conglomerate of different crime or illegal activity that's happening with this, and it's been somewhat difficult to track. That's why they've developed that kind of this specific project to focus on that itself. And gift card fraud continues to kind of grow, and this one was very particular to focus on Chinese organized crime groups itself.
It must be very lucrative to have individuals actually then coming over to the US in order to commit these crimes, or employing runners, as you say, on home soil. Is there any indication of just what the financial impact to the industry is?
When I was reading on this, it looks like it's in the hundreds of millions, and depending on the scale of it and what they can link to specifically Chinese organized crime groups, potentially billion, but it's at that point, it is hundreds of millions of dollars. And then there becomes the issue of, you have still consumers purchasing cards and the victimization side of them. If it's the phishing attacks or victim assisted, you now have this distrust in some retail groups itself based on the consumer, which is then problematic even long term. So yes, there's that quick financial part and gift card fraud, but then it could lose you customers in the long term too.
That's such a good point. The consumer experience that, that if they fall victim to this and feel that they've been put in a vulnerable position, and perhaps, the businesses haven't done enough to support them, you can see how that could have a really negative impact. So this Homeland Security Investigations initiative, how are they going to tackle this? Or is this going to be the end of gift cards? How do you clamp down on this type of behaviour?
And I think it's similar to coming back to the Grassley bill. It's trying to build that collaborative network. So it is the communication from federal law enforcement and prosecution to local jurisdictions and retail. So it is this cross-pollination group of you need multiple people sitting at a table if you're going to solve that problem. You can't take it just from one side or the other. It is a retail issue, but law enforcement are dealing with it heavily. And it's an international issue that's affecting the US. So we truly have to have multiple people at that table to combat it. So I think it's where you have to start with this and kind of keep heading in that direction. There's still tracking groups, the network itself, and I won't be surprised if they continue to make arrests and prosecutions in this endeavor.